Thank you, Mr. Chair. Gentlemen, thank you for being here today. Thank you very much for your service. It's a very difficult time. General Dunford, I was in theater with a handful of colleagues about the week before you were in theater. I was very disturbed at what I see going on in the ground. It's a very tumultuous time. Chairman Dunford, you did state that we need to take the fight to ISIL, and we need to continue the momentum. And it's concerning because to continue the momentum, we actually have to have momentum going forward. And right now, the only group that I see in Iraq that's fighting ISIL that has momentum is the Kurdish Peshmerga. And again, everybody knows how I feel about this. They've been great allies to us. And in testimony before this committee over the past several months, we've had many, many prestigious former military commanders and governmental officials, such as General David Petraeus, General Mike Hayden, General Jack Keane, and of course, former Secretary Bob Gates. And all of them agreed that we really do need to enhance our support to the Iraqi Kurds as part of a more comprehensive strategy against ISIS. And I'm very concerned that right now our current strategy piecemeals the weapons, the equipment, and my gosh, we have so many various types of calibers of weapons that's going from our coalition partners and the United States to the Kurdish Peshmerga. And as a logistician, as a transporter, supported those forces, our forces in Iraq, I know how difficult this would be for any army, that we are piecemealing so much up to the Peshmerga. So what is our strategy to develop a more capable Peshmerga force for the long-term fight for ISIS? Secretary Carter, if you could address that, please.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. The Kurdish Peshmerga are a excellent example of capable and motivated ground forces. And so they have taken and held territory. We support them, and most recently, of course, in the operation conducted this past week. With respect to equipping them, and from your logistics background, as you indicated very well, that rapidity and certainty of supply are very important to them. And we have a policy of routing equipment to the Kurdish Peshmerga through the government of Baghdad. And I think that's where the hinge on which your question turns, for the reason, to get back to what Senator King was asking earlier, that our approach to Iraq is to try to support a multi-sectarian government in Baghdad. So we're trying to do both, supply the Peshmerga and support Prime Minister Abadi as the leader of the country overall. Now, in the early days, that issue led to some delay in our supplies to the Kurdish Peshmerga. Those delays do not occur now. And so and by the way, it's not just us. I think there are more than 14 other countries that are shipping tons and tons of equipment to the Kurdish Peshmerga. And so I do not believe there now is a bottleneck in our supply to the Kurdish Peshmerga. We still do go through the routine of shipping through and with the permission of the government of Baghdad, for the very simple reason that we want to stick up for the principle of multi-sector.
I do believe that we need to do a better job at this. General Dunford, just very quick, if I could turn to you. How do the Iraqi security forces or the Iraqi army, how do their maneuver fires and effects units compare to the Kurdish Peshmerga's units?
I think the best of the Iraqis, the CTS forces, and some of the brigades we trained compare favorably to the Peshmerga. The Peshmerga also have very competent forces, but I think the best of the Iraqis are about comparable to the Peshmerga.
Okay, and we're utilizing them to the best of our capability.
We are, and Senator, that's an important question, because the one thing that the commanders told me is those brigades that we actually have put through training, there is a qualitative difference in their performance. There's 2 brigades, for example, surrounding Ramadi right now that have gone through our training program, and those 2 brigades have performed at a much higher level than the other units, as well as the CTS, the Counterterrorism Service, has also performed very well.
So you believe that training and advising and assisting below the division level would be very important in any future operations?
I do, from a training perspective in particular, yes, Senator.
I do believe that needs to be part of our decision-making process as we move forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Dunford, in your testimony, you went over a number of areas that we need to focus on in our fight to defeat ISIL, and you said that we need to do more to cut the flow of foreign fighters to ISIL. Can you briefly describe what we're doing now and what more we need to do in this area?
I can, Senator. I had an opportunity. We have a team on the ground. They're part of a 10-nation coalition that's working on foreign fighters right now. But it's mostly a military view of foreign fighters. And so when I sat down and spoke to that team, you know, one of the challenges that became clear is that we really don't have amongst all the coalition kind of a common view of where the foreign fighters come from, how they move back and forth into the area, but more importantly, not much of a track on where they go once they leave back to their home country. So from my perspective, and this is an area that Secretary Carter and I have spoken to Secretary Kerry about last week, from my perspective, we need to do much more, one, to get a view of foreign fighters as a whole, and to make sure we maximize the legal, the military, and the political tools that are available to us to cut off the flow of foreign fighters.
So is this an area that we're going to see some kind of a measurable improvement?
Senator, for me, when I came back from my visit, there are 2 areas that I think we need to focus on to move the campaign forward, 2 of many. And the 2 that I personally engage on is, 1, foreign fighters, and the other is intelligence.
So we're going to see some appreciable, measurable improvements. And I know you can't talk about the intelligence side of things in this setting. So, Secretary Carter, in response to a question, you said that the time frame for defeating ISIL is it better be soon. And from everything that we understand, this whole area of the world is very complicated, and so it is, I realize, difficult to really hone in, I suppose, on what a reasonable time frame may be. At the same time, with regard to Assad, there were indications that he was about to collapse, that his regime was about to collapse. But now that Russia has come in to bolster the Assad regime, 2 questions. How long do you think that Assad can be propped up by Russia's actions? And 2, do you think that Putin really is looking at a long-term scenario where Assad stays in place, or is he much more interested long-term in the stability of Syria for Russia's own interests?
I can't say what Vladimir Putin is thinking about Assad's future, but I can tell you what his behavior suggests. And that is that he does want to support, at least for now, Assad, avoid the collapse of the Syrian state, which, as you indicated, I think he believed could occur, and that was one of the things that spurred his support, enhanced support for Assad. I've told you what I think of that approach. I think that it's going to backfire, that is, have the opposite of the effect that he is seeking. It enhances the opposition to Assad, and it also enhances the extremism he says he fears. So it's not a very sensible strategy, but that appears to be what his behaviors suggest.
That appears to be his immediate goal, but I think that Putin is also smart enough to figure out that if he really wants stability in Syria, he may not be able to get it as long as Assad is in power. I wanted to get to the no-fly zone. What would we need to do if a no-fly zone is declared in Syria? What would we need to do to make sure that that no-fly zone sticks? Either one of you.
Yeah, I'll start, and then maybe the chairman can say. So we have now for quite a while, and preceding my time as Secretary of Defense, analyzed the possibility of no-fly zones. And I tried to give you some of the indication of some of the considerations there. That would involve operating in the part of the country which is not generally where we're conducting air operations now, and where there are Syrian air defenses.
Yes.
And if we were going to put air crews in that environment, we would have to take care of those air defenses, which is a substantial military undertaking in its own.
So one scenario could
right.
be that Assad would not abide by a no-fly zone, and we would need to protect him. Therefore, we would be in direct conflict.
I think you have to
with,
assume that these
Assad.
An no-fly zone would be contested by Assad because its very
Yes.
intent was to engage his air force. And just again to get back to Senator Graham's point, we have not undertaken to have U.S. forces engage Assad's forces in a war for control.
And that's probably one of the reasons
Syria.
with
We
that
haven't
kind
taken
of,
that step.
excuse me, with that kind of likely scenario, it's probably one of the reasons that we hesitate in creating a
It's a
no-fly zone.
substantial and new military undertaking, and likewise,
Thank you.
Zones on the ground would have to be defended as well. So there are military implications to the declaration of such zones. We have thought them through, but we have not made recommendations to that.
Thank you very
effect at
much,
this time.
Mr. Chairman.
What you're saying is the strongest nation in the world with the most capable military can't even establish a no-fly zone to protect people from being barrel bombed by Bashar Assad. That's an embarrassing moment.
Just to
Senator
be clear,
Tillis.
Chairman, we could do it.
Of course we could do it. People like General Petraeus and General Keane and every other military leader that I know of. And we're talking about having to shoot down all we have to do is protect it and tell them not to fly into it. History shows that they won't if they're going to get shot down. Senator Tillis.
General Dunford, Secretary Carter said that the Russian presence in Syria has not affected the pace or the scope of U.S. operations there. Is that because the pace is slow and the scope is narrow? How does that happen when we have the administration saying that we're not going to have any sort of conflicts with Russian air presences in Syria? It would seem like it is affecting the pace and scope. Do you agree with Secretary Carter?
Senator, I do. We are because we're focused on ISIL, and the Russians are largely conducting operations to the west. We are not operating in the same area as the Russians right now, and we've had 2 or 3 incidents where we've had contact with Russian aircraft, and those preceded the memorandum of understanding that was signed on the 20th of the month.
So I guess that goes back to what Chairman McCain said. A part of that is because we're not necessarily providing support to those who are not trained, who are trying to take the fight to Assad, but we're not specifically trained by us. Is that?
That's correct, Senator. We're operating in 2 different areas.
I want to get to Iraq, and specifically in your meetings in Iraq. First, I'd like an update on Iranian presence there, and then secondly, I've only been here for 10 months, and the discussion about having the Iraqi government re-engage the Sunnis is already a broken record. Over the last year, is there any tangible evidence that they've actually acted on the words of re-engaging?
Yeah, Senator, with the caveat that we're not satisfied with the outreach to the Sunni and very aware that that's a necessary condition for us to be successful, is that we actually do have an inclusive government, inclusive of the Sunni. There has been some progress. For example, in the Anbar province, there was an agreement to train and equip 8,000 Sunni. We've had about 5,000 that have been identified, have been recruited, and have been trained of that 8,000 number. So that's slow progress.
Is that more transactional? Sorry, General Dunford, I want to be sensitive to time. Is that more of a transactional win, or are you seeing any sort of systemic changes that are going to make sure that remains sustained and that we build on it?
I can't tell you that I've seen systemic changes, Senator.
I don't think there is any. What about the Iranian presence in Iraq right now? Where are they? What are they doing? And what should we be concerned with?
Well, they still have the provisional forces that are there.
Is that still around 1,000?
You know, Senator, the numbers have been bounced around. I think it's been more. You'd say 1,000. Yeah, I think there's more than 1,000 Iranians that are on the ground in Iraq.
And in Syria?
In Syria, we think the numbers are probably something less than 2,000, is our assessment.
Secretary Carter, I appreciate you mentioning Sergeant Wheeler. I know that he was from Oklahoma, but he and his wife and 4 sons, including a 3-month-old, live down in North Carolina. I think that in that particular operation, you made a comment that those are operations that are probably occurring frequently, if not on a daily basis, but frequently, and American soldiers are at risk. In my opinion, I think the Peshmerga would consider that a combat operation. Do you consider what Sergeant Wheeler was doing a combat operation?
Sure, he was killed in combat. That wasn't the intent, obviously. He was accompanying those forces. But when he saw that they were running into trouble, he very heroically acted in a way that all the reports suggest spelled the difference between the success and failure of that important mission. So it truly was a
my final question, I want to start with General Dunford. General Dunford, were you consulted by the President before he vetoed the NDA?
I was not, Senator.
Do you consider the NDA being, having been passed either positive or negative to the men and women in uniform in your efforts?
Senator, I think my job is to identify the requirements that we need to support the force.
Do you think some of those requirements were fulfilled by our passage of the NDA?
Absolutely, Senator.
Okay, and
Inside
as
the
a result of the veto, those requirements are not going to be fulfilled unless we can come up with a solution?
Unless there's a solution, Senator.
Thank you. Senator, or Secretary Carter, were you consulted by the President before he vetoed the NDA?
I was, yeah.
And what was your recommendation to him?
My recommendation was to support his veto.
Was to support his veto?
I supported it. I'll tell you why.
That was going to be my next question.
Sure. Two principal reasons. The first is that and I've started saying this in March, and I believe it.
Mr. Carter, I'm going to be out of time. There may be other people following
Well, let
up
me just
with
tell
it,
you
but
what those
let me-
two,
let
it's an
me
important
finish, and then
subject.
to the extent the chair will let you continue, I will defer to him. But are you telling me then that you think that the President's veto leaves our military of the NDA better off than with it?
The President's veto of the NDAA is something that reflected 2 facts, just to get back to what I was going to say. One is that we need, and I believe the Department of Defense needs, budget stability greater than a 1-year horizon.
And so taking
and
a
a
step
foundation
back,
of base funding that is adequate.
Mr. Secretary, nobody
for our
on this
needs.
committee disagrees with you. That's a well-worn path in discussions. It goes all the way back to sequestration. But I find it remarkable, given the circumstances we're in now and the testimony today, that we would take a step back with this NDA while we continue to fight that fight, because that's going to require a willing administration. And one thing's clear to me, this administration is not willing to confront the challenges that these men and women have in uniform today. Taking a step back in these dangerous times, I don't think makes sense, and I respectfully disagree with your recommendation to support the veto. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, if I can just say, I think that just to say what I think we need is what I hope is going on now, which is a true budget agreement where Washington comes together behind a honest, straightforward budget with some multi-year horizon. That's what the department deserves, and that's what I've been saying for months, and perhaps that is occurring as we speak. But I can only be honest and say what I think is best for the department, and that's honestly what we need. I realize that no individual member or individual committee can deliver that. It requires a coming together of gridlocked Washington behind an overall budget deal. I fervently hope that that occurs. I know there's some indication, I'm not involved in it, over the last couple of days that that might occur, and that is what I have been urging ever since March, and I fervently hope that can occur. That's what the troops deserve. That's what the world needs to see.
I would point out that OCO will be part of this agreement as well. Mr. Secretary, if you want to complete your answer, please continue, or have you completed it?
There's just one other aspect that I'd ask the committee also apropos of the NDAA. There are a number of reforms that we have requested now for several years consecutively that have been denied in the authorization bill, and I'd ask
For example,
some having to do with health care, some having to do with adjustments in force structure. These are things that the relevant armed services have determined are the optimal use of their resources, and the authority to carry out those reforms has been denied. And I just appeal to you not to allow those reforms, because it is the professional judgment of the Department of Defense that better use for those funds can be had. And in years when it's difficult to find funding for the federal government, and I understand all the reasons for that, we have to use every dollar we do get to best use. And we're not able to do that with some of the restrictions that are in the NDAA, and that's another reason why I'd ask you to reconsider some of its provisions. Thank you for the time to elaborate on that, Senator.
well, I'd also point out that there's about $11 billion in savings, including a mandatory 7.5% per year reduction in headquarters staff, which we'll be glad to show you the dramatic growth in those, tooth to tail, and many other reforms that have been made. And I look forward to looking at further reforms with you as we begin new hearings when we resolve this issue, and further very necessary reforms that we feel are called for. And I'm proud of the reforms, frankly, that in a bipartisan basis this committee enacted. I am proud of the fact that we have dramatically revised the retirement system. I am proud of the fact that we are finally trying to get a handle on the cost overruns that has characterized acquisition practices. So you may have some concerns. I can't tell you, after being on this committee for nearly 30 years, how proud I am of the bipartisan product that we produced. And I hope that maybe sometime you might recognize that. Senator Blumenthal.
May I just second that?
Go
I'm
right
proud too. And I thank you, and I thank you personally. I don't mean to say that reforms haven't been enacted. There's some additional ones that we would like to have, but I salute the committee. And the only way we can ask the taxpayer to give us more money for defense, which we need, is if we can also show that we use every dollar well. So I appreciate your leadership in that regard, Chairman.
I thank you, Mr. Secretary. We do look forward to it. We'll have hearings beginning this week on restructuring that I think are necessary. We want to work very closely with you, and I'm very proud to work very closely with a graduate of West Point. Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and thank both of you for your service to our nation and for your candid and forthright answers today in an area that is exceedingly difficult. As you may know, I'm working with a number of colleagues who both supported and opposed the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action to strengthen United States policy toward Iran, in other words, to improve and strengthen that agreement, among other ways, by providing more military assistance to our allies in the area and anticipating that some of the financial windfall will go toward increased extremism and even terrorist violence in that area. And so to bolster the defenses and military capacity of our allies in that region, this legislation will reassert the United States policy that a nuclear-armed Iran will never be permitted. It will reaffirm our dedication to imposing sanctions related to terror financing and human rights abuses, and it will ensure that our allies, most especially Israel, will be provided with the assets that they need so that their defense will be bolstered and they will be able to deter Iran. General Dunford, you've just visited the area. Can you tell us what additional assets we can provide, and can you commit, and Secretary Carter, I ask you to join in this question, that the United States will, in fact, bolster assets going to Israel and our other allies in the Middle East, and comment on this legislation. Thank you.
Senator, I can't talk to the details now. I can tell you that the Minister of Defense from Israel is here today for meetings with Secretary Carter. We'll have dinner with him this evening, and as you probably know, they're developing their perspective on what cooperation further we might have with them, to include the details of capability development that I had some initial discussions with their Chief of Defense, Minister of Defense, and Prime Minister last week during my visit.
In the conversations that preceded our votes on the agreement, I was assured, and I think other colleagues were assured, that in effect Israel will receive all the necessary assistance to make sure that its qualitative edge is not only maintained but enhanced. Is that the policy of the administration?
Yeah, qualitative military edge of Israel is an important part of our overall policy toward the Middle East, and that's exactly what I'll be talking to, and along with the chairman, the defense minister of Israel, about today. And of course, that's one ingredient of our overall support for Israel. And also, I should add, other Gulf partners and allies. And I also need to add, since you're asking about the Iran nuclear agreement, the maintenance of the military option, which we are charged with continuing to do, and I continue to pay personal attention to that. I believe the chairman does as well. And our efforts to counter Iranian malign influence around the region and protect our friends and allies. So there are a lot of dimensions to what we do there. And all of that, which is our activity, remains unchanged with this Iran agreement. All of those things, the military option, support to Israel, support to other Gulf countries, that is longstanding pursuit of American interests in the Gulf, and we're going to keep doing that.
I recognize that the policy remains unchanged, but the military assets will have to be increased, won't they?
We will be doing more with Israel. That's one of the reasons. That's one of the subjects of my discussions with Defense Minister Yalon, as it was when I visited there a couple of months ago, and he hosted me the way I'll be hosting him over the next couple of days.
And can you tell us whether you're satisfied with the progress that's been made in those discussions?
He and I have a very good relationship, a very easy relationship. So these discussions are discussions among friends. We do things with Israel and have a closeness there that we have with very few other countries around the world. And I can't go into all the details here, but we can share them separately. But it's a very close defense and a trusted defense relationship.
I would appreciate your sharing those details in a different forum. I am very interested in the details of the discussions that are underway now, and I want to be satisfied that we are fulfilling the commitments that were made to myself and my colleagues in the course of our discussions before the Iran agreement vote. Thank you very much to you both. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen. Like Chairman McCain's statement today, General Petraeus was here recently, and in his testimony, he also emphasized that in the Middle East there's no easy answers, but that inaction has costs, whether it's others filling the vacuum like we're seeing with Russia and the Middle East and in Syria, or whether U.S. credibility is undermined, especially when inaction contradicts policy statements. I think this is and I think most of the members of the committee see this as a significant problem, not only in the Middle East, but beyond. General Dunford, do you believe that inaction has its own costs, and how does the U.S. military weigh the costs of inaction, of doing nothing, when you're presenting options to the President for options on what we should be doing in the military, in the Middle East?
First of all, Senator, I absolutely agree that inaction is unacceptable when we talk about protecting our national interests, so there's no question about that. And with regard to when we provide military options to a particular challenge, absolutely, I think it's my responsibility to clearly articulate both the opportunity cost and the risk associated with not taking action against a particular issue.
Thank you. Secretary Carter, many members of the committee have been concerned about U.S. inaction in another part of the world, in the South China Sea. and a lot of us on this committee saw that inaction was raising costs and undermining U.S. credibility. There was a number of us who were complimentary of your speech at the Shangri-La Dialogue. I was going to express concern about that, but just read in the paper about the freedom of navigation operation that we evidently conducted inside a 12-mile zone of a built-up Chinese island just yesterday. Is that true? Did we do that?
We have made a commitment, and I appreciate your support, as part of our rebalance to the Asia-Pacific, which is so important to America's future. We're doing more at sea. We're doing more in the way of presence. And just to give a general answer to what you said, we have said, and we are acting on the basis of saying that we will fly, sail, and operate wherever international law permits.
Did we send a destroyer yesterday inside the 12-mile zone of one of the...
that. There have been naval operations in that region in recent days, and there will be in the weeks and months.
Inside the 12-mile zone of a
I don't want to
built
comment on
up...
a particular operation, but...
You don't want to comment? It's all over the press right now.
I'm sure it is, but we reserve the right to conduct.
If we do that within a built-up island that was an undersea submerged rock, is that consistent with international law?
Yes, it is.
So should we be doing that on a regular basis in terms of freedom of navigation exercises?
We will fly, sail, and operate wherever international law permits and whenever our operational needs require.
It'd be good to know, just for the committee's
that, we will.
perspective, whether or not the press reports are accurate of what we did. Let me ask another question about another area in the world where it seems like U.S. inaction clearly seems to be inviting more Russian aggression, where Russian actions are changing facts on the ground. Mr. Secretary, in your confirmation hearing, you talked about the Arctic is going to be a major area of importance to the United States, but strategically and economically in the future. But you said it's fair to say that we're late to the recognition of that. I think it's also fair to say that the Russians are not late to the recognition of that. Since your confirmation, the Russians have done the following in the Arctic: a new Arctic military command, 4 new Arctic brigade combat teams, 14 new operational airfields in the Russian Arctic, announcements of up to 50 new airfields by 2020, a 30% increase of Russian special forces in the Arctic, 40 icebreakers. We have 2, one is broken. Huge new land claims in the Arctic, increased long-range air patrols with their Bear bombers, the most since the Cold War, a major military exercise in March that caught the U.S. military completely off guard, 45,000 troops, over 3,000 military vehicles, 41 naval ships, 15 submarines, 110 military aircraft, numerous elements of Russia's Western Military District and elite airborne troops in that exercise. A lot of this concerns the committee. In the NDAA, which the President vetoed, we had a unanimous agreement here to create an operations plan for the Arctic. That's an important step to ensuring we have continued good options in the Arctic. Can I get your commitment, both of you, to work with this committee on a robust military plan that will enable us to check Russia's aggressions in the Arctic, keep our options open, and maintain our credibility in that important area of the world, given that that's in the NDAA right now?
Yeah, you have mine, and I appreciate your leadership in this regard. The Arctic is an important region for the United States and actually for the entire world. And so we need to do more there, and I appreciate the fact that you are a champion of that and can consider me a supporter, and I appreciate it. And we'll have a chance actually to discuss that in Alaska later this week.
Yes, sir. Thank you. General Dunford?
Yes, Senator.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Secretary, sometimes here on this committee, we have a sense of frustration. The news reports all day are about a U.S. destroyer, naming the destroyer, going inside the 12-mile zone. around these islands. Why would you not confirm or deny that that happened, since all the details and the action happened? This is what frustrates members of this committee when it's out there in the media, throughout, saturating the media, and you won't even tell us. Is it what, maybe you understand our frustration here, Mr. Secretary?
I do understand your frustration, and I just match it with my own frustration, which is that these are operations that we should be conducting normally.
But the American people should know about it, and we're their representatives. And you refuse to even confirm or deny something that is all over the media and confirmed by everyone? And you come before this committee and say you won't comment on it? Why?
Well, I'm going to not be coy with you. I don't like, in general, the idea of talking about our military operations, but what you read in the newspaper is accurate, but I don't want to say more than that, and I don't want to say when, and whether, and how we operate anywhere in the world. One of the things
I don't think that the senator asked you to tell why, when, and how. He just asked you whether you could confirm it or not.
I can.
Thank you. Mr. Donnelly, Senator Donnelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to get back to Syria and to some of the questions the chairman was asking about safe zones. We seem lost. We seem lost and at confusion about what to do next, unable to put any real marker down or have any plan for success. The people are voting, and they're voting with their feet. They're leaving. There's refugees all over the world now. And we have the opportunity to set up safe zones. And what I hear is we're worried about the Russians, we're worried about the Syrians, we're worried about all of these things. I mean, at what point do we put a plan together, execute the plan, tell them what we're going to do, and say, stay out of the way?
With respect to a safe, I distinguish a safe zone from a no-fly zone. A safe zone is a zone on the ground. We have analyzed them and discussed them with partners in the region. They are principally not in regions where we would expect them to be contested so much by Assad as by ISIL and al-Nusra. And therefore, they have to be defended against that threat, and that's a military undertaking.
Then are we unwilling
people
to...
in the region who, we have not made that recommendation.
At what point, how many people have to leave before we make that decision?
Senator, let me go back. It's going to if you create a zone like that, then you do have to ask who is going to come into the zone. Are there people who have left Syria who are going to return to Syria from Turkey or Europe to occupy a zone from which they didn't come? Are there people elsewhere in Syria who are going to come to that zone? So you do have to ask yourself, for whom would it be attractive to be in such a zone? And then secondly, who is going to defend?
Probably some of the folks in Germany and in other countries who would rather have stayed in their own country.
If they wish to return to the part of the country for which the zone, in which the zone is created. But again, it would depend on where it was, and it would be contested.
Well, let me ask you, in barrel bombs, we've talked about this time after time here. Why are we unwilling to send a message to Assad that if he continues with barrel bombing, we will stop him and crater his runways?
We have not undertaken to engage as the U.S. military, the Syrian military. We have not taken that step.
So how do you ever stop the barrel bombing?
The way that the civil war in Syria will end, just to get back to what we've been saying repeatedly, is for Assad to depart and for there to be a political
Why would he
transition.
depart at this point?
Because the opposition to him is intense and strengthening.
Well, as far as I can see, he's had 3 or 4 additional allies come on board. If anything, the calculation for him is his cards are getting better.
No, again, our priority has been to combat ISIL. We are not, as the U.S. military, undertaking to combat Syria.
Well, let me just
That's
ask you
not a
this. In
decision-
the process
not a
of
decision.
combating ISIL, does the United States stand by as another nation barrel bombs the people we're trying to protect?
We have sought now for some time and continue to do a political transition in Syria that would end the Syrian civil war. We have not pursued a military solution to that.
I would just say, from my perspective, and I'm not an expert like both of you, we seem lost. And I have extraordinary confidence in the leadership at this table, but we seem lost, and I would love to see alternate plans that may be out there. General Dunford, I was in Iraq a few months ago, was with the Sunni tribal leaders, and I just want to ask your best military judgment. In spending time with them, they said, look, if you showed an interest in us, if you showed, had a helicopter come by every now and then, showed you really wanted to provide us with guidance, with logistics, with advice, et cetera, that partnership, that friendship we've always felt, we'll be there. We'll get the job done. Do you think they have that capability?
Senator, I do. There are Sunnis that absolutely can take the fight to the enemy, and we've seen that in the past.
So while we try to continue to hope and pray that the Iraqi security force gets better, are we sitting here with Sunni tribal leaders who have the individuals who can actually start to move ISIS out of Ramadi?
I think if the central government would do better at outreach to the Sunni, we absolutely could recruit more, train more, equip more, and support more Sunni in the fight.
So I think it's almost fair to say the team is ready to go. They just need to get the signal to go.
It would take some work, Senator, but there are people out there that we could put together to fight ISIL.
And that's how we start to move ISIL out, I think. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. On behalf of Chairman McCain, let me recognize Senator Lee.
Thank you. And thank you, Secretary Carter and General Dunford, for appearing in front of our committee today and for your service to our country. The White House has been sending mixed and at times contradictory messages about what our interests are and what threats to our security exist in the Middle East. Many Americans are understandably coming to find our current strategy somewhat reminiscent of the old Warren Zevon song, since the President's reaction seems to be to send in lawyers, guns, and money whenever and wherever a crisis breaks out. The situation in the Middle East is a very complicated problem for our current posture, but it's certainly not historically aberrational. For more than 100 years, this region has been dominated by either external powers or internal authoritarians who have destroyed cultural institutions and disrupted the natural development of societies. The decentralization of power in these states, compounded by radical Islamism and ancient sectarian grievances, amounts to a time-tested recipe for the kind of conflict and instability that we're seeing today and that tends to threaten our security. We continue to receive mixed, contradictory reports about the effectiveness of ongoing efforts to retain, train, and equip the Iraqi security forces. When I ask why we believe it will work this time around, I'm usually told by defense officials something like the following, something like, well, we have a better political partner in Baghdad now than we did before, and we have a partner who will not repeat the mistakes of his predecessor. Now, this is not encouraging, as we know how quickly political institutions, political situations and calculations can change in the Middle East, particularly right now. So, General Dunford, I'm more concerned by what your predecessor, General Dempsey, described as the will to fight factor among the ISF, and I believe that extends beyond simply having a better leader in Baghdad. Do you believe the kind of united Iraq that we've seen for the past century, that is with borders drawn by the British and French and held together either by a Western-backed monarchy or a Ba'athist dictator, is something for which the people of Iraq have the genuine will to fight, especially when they don't have emergency assistance from a coalition like they have right now?
Senator, I think for most people in Iraq, it's a lot more local than it is national. And I do think that if a central government, for example, would outreach to the Sunni in the Anbar province and provide basic services, that we would get Sunni fighters that would fight on behalf of the government. We've seen that in the past.
So I'd like to expand the question a little bit more broadly to places like Syria or Yemen. Do people of those countries have the will to fight for united governments in places where current territorial lines may have been imposed by a foreign force?
There's no evidence that I would know of that would indicate that they would.
Unfortunately, I think that we're looking too hard for an easy answer or a simple answer to some of these complicated questions. And I encourage my colleagues and the American people to thoughtfully consider options in the Middle East before continuing down paths that I believe may lead to mission creep and to an indefinite U.S. military presence to prop up weak and sort of artificially created states designated around unsustainable boundaries. Now, the Department of Defense's Syria Train and Equip program failed. It failed by a long shot to find and train the level of fighters desired under the vetting requirements established by Congress and the White House. Congress put these requirements in place because we were very concerned about who would be using U.S. assistance and for what purposes they would be using it. Secretary Carter, does the failure of this program indicate to you that the viable ground force we desire for Syria simply does not exist within the parameters that the American taxpayer may be willing to support?
Well, I was disappointed in it as well, but I don't draw that conclusion. There are forces in Syria willing to fight ISIL and capable of fighting ISIL. We talked about the Syrian Kurds as an example of that, the so-called Syrian Arab Coalition, and in the new train and equip effort that we described today, we will look to identify and then support capable and motivated forces on Syrian territory that are willing to take on ISIL. We've identified some of them already, and the new approach is to enable them, train them, and equip them rather than trying to create such forces anew, which was the previous approach. And I do understand why that approach was taken, and you're right. It was authorized by this committee last December, and I understand the considerations that went into that. I have concluded, and the President concluded, that that approach wasn't working the way that it was conceived of a year ago, and that's precisely why we've changed the approach. So we have a different approach that we think will allow us to gain more momentum, and in particular to allow us to put pressure on the city of Raqqa, which is the self-declared capital of the caliphate. So on the Syrian side of the counter-ISIL fight, that is our intent, and we're trying to gather momentum in that and several other ways that we detailed.
Okay, thank you. I see my time's expired, Mr. Chairman.
On behalf of Chairman McCain, let me recognize Senator McCaskill.
Yes. Senator Reid, thank you all for being here. And by the way, let me just at the beginning of my questions give a mention to Master Sergeant Joshua Wheeler. He is, there probably is no better example of someone who has run to danger for this country over and over and over again. I believe this was his 14th deployment. So I wanted to mention his name in the hearing today. We all mourn his loss and the loss of his family, and we support them as they move through this trying time. Senator Reid asked you about the new Syrian forces in northern Syria. Have we provided resupply to those forces?
We have, Senator.
Okay. And have they successfully called in airstrikes?
They have, Senator.
Okay. And can you tell us, for the record, how many?
I cannot, Senator. I can get that information for you. I don't know the number.
That would be terrific. On Iraq, train and equip, as you all know, I have a tendency to read those IG reports. The one that came out September 30th raised several concerns that I'm worried about. One is asking us to refurbish the conditions under which these Iraqis are training. The DIG recommends that the coalition work with the Iraqi Minister of Defense to devise and implement a plan that clarifies the contributions of Iraq and the United States to improve their living conditions. Evidently, the IG is saying that we're having desertions because they're living in such squalor in terms of the conditions under which they're training. I just think of the billions and billions on infrastructure we spend in Iraq, and I'm trying to get my arms around, are we going to go in and fix up something that's going to rot when we leave? Or is Iraq going to step up and do what's necessary to make these conditions palatable for the recruits?
Senator, what I would tell you, and this is my perspective, and I think this is where we're at right now, is that our relationship with Iraq has to be transactional, and there has to be certain conditions that they would meet before we would provide support. And that absolutely is the framework within which I'll provide recommendations for any support to the Iraqi forces, would be that it would be based on their behavior and their willingness to be true partners and meet certain conditions that would indicate they'd be headed in the direction that you described.
Capital expenditures, just really great, I think, on many of us who have watched the amount of money that we wasted on capital expenditures in Iraq. And on that same line of questioning, the MRAPs that are coming from Afghanistan, the same IG report points out that many of them are missing parts, and there's a real question whether they have the capability of maintaining these MRAPs going forward. Once again, are there discussions about who is going to bear the costs of making these MRAPs that we're giving them actually operational?
Senator, you talk about the MRAPs we gave to the Afghan security forces?
I'm talking about the excess ones that we're moving over. U.S. is providing 250 MRAPs to the Iraqi army. They're excess defense items and being shipped to Iraq from Afghanistan. Those are the MRAPs I'm talking about.
Yeah, I can't comment on what the arrangements are, but I'll get that information for you, Senator, in terms of what arrangements were made as we've given them. Typically, when we provide that equipment, it's in as-is condition when we provide it to another country, and I assume that's the rule.
I just want to make sure we're not going to the expense of sending them something that isn't operational, that we don't want to have to spend a lot of money to fix up, and secondly, that they don't have the capability of maintaining. Sustainability, Secretary Carter knows this has been a refrain from the very beginning. It does us no good to give them things if they cannot sustain it. And of course, that's one of the reasons that we're having the problems in Iraq we have right now, is they were politically incapable of sustainability. Briefly, on a separate subject, I just want to bring this up, and I won't go into the details here, but I am desperately trying to get at helping the veterans that were subjected to mustard gas experiments. And I'm having a really difficult time with your folks about this. They're saying that even if I have the name of the veteran and the privacy waiver, they will not give me information out of your mustard gas database without a letter from the chairman. I don't understand why this is so hard. Why is everyone not opening up these records and doing everything we can to get the word to these people? There are a lot of folks out there that were subjected to mustard gas experiments, and the VA wants to point at you, and I'm hitting a wall at DOD on this. And I really need a commitment from you all today that you will get me the information as to why why me trying to help veterans who maybe have been exposed to mustard gas, why this should be so hard. Would you all be willing to make that commitment that you will work with my office instead of they just keep throwing up roadblocks? I've been at this
Senator,
for months.
I'm not familiar with this issue, but as always, we'll make sure that we support your request. I'll look into it and with the chairman, and we'll get back to you as appropriate.
And I've been waiting since July for evidence to back up your claim that there was justification for the $36 million, 664,000 square foot building in Afghanistan. There was a call for discipline for the people who had okayed that building. It's sitting empty, and I've been asking since July as to, you said that you didn't think, Secretary Carter, you contested the findings and said that you didn't think disciplinary action was appropriate. I've asked what the evidence is that would indicate disciplinary action is not appropriate, and I've been waiting since July. So if you could get that on your to-do list too, I would really appreciate it.
Will do so.
You've got an able helper behind you there who ought to help with this. Thank you very much.
On behalf of Chairman McCain, let me recognize Senator Sessions. Senator Sessions, please.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
very much. Senator McCain laid out some serious criticisms of how we're conducting our policy in the Middle East. I share most of those. I don't think they're little matters. They're important matters. And I think we've made some mistakes and struggled in ways that are not good. I think it's, so I'll just leave it at that. What I'd like to address today is the need for a strategy long-term in the Middle East. I asked Kenneth Pollock of the Brookings Institution several months ago. He had mentioned in his statement this may take a long time. So I asked him the whole problem of extremism in the Middle East, this spasm of violence we're seeing throughout the entire region, how complex it is, and I asked him, and so I followed up with him and said, so you're saying this could last 10, 20, 50 years? And I remember very vividly, he looked at me and he gave an answer you don't often get. Yes. That was his answer. So and do we need a strategy, a long-term strategy that could deal with that? I've asked that question to Walter Russell Mead, and he said he'd never seen us as a nation be so unfocused in a strategy, the historian that he is. The entire panel, I believe week before last, General Jimmy Jones, President Obama's National Security Advisor, General Keane, Ambassador, another scholar, all agreed that we need a strategy, and we really don't have one. Then I asked Secretary Gates last week, and this is what he said that I think is relevant. He said, my concern is that I don't see an overreaching or overriding strategy on the part of the United States with this complex challenge for the next 20 or 30 years. And one of the benefits of containment, and there are lots of disagreements about how to apply it and how the wars we fought under it and so on, but I will always believe that critical to our success in the Cold War was that we had a broad strategy called containment that was practiced by 9 successive administrations of both political parties. It had bipartisan support, the general notion of how to deal with this. So we don't have anything like that with respect to the Middle East. And I think that is long, and so we're kind of dealing with each of these crises individually, rather than backing up and saying, what's our long-term game plan here? And who are going to be our allies? Who are going to be our friends? Where do we contain? Where do we let it burn itself out? We just haven't really addressed those long-term questions because it seems to me we're thinking strictly in the short term of month to month. Well, I know we've got 9 points, Secretary Carter, but I don't sense anyone in the region or anyone in the Congress believes that we have a deeply studied and long-term policy for the Middle East that could extend for decades. First of all, do you think we need one, and do we have one?
We have a strategy toward the Middle East, and many elements of it are, in fact, of long-standing, decades long-standing. Again, that our strategy begins with the pursuit of American interests, and that involves protecting our own country and our people, defending longstanding friends and allies who include the Gulf states and especially Israel, which was discussed already, opposing the introduction of nuclear weapons to the region, which gets us to the Iran circumstance, and in the current matter of ISIL, protecting our people and our friends and allies against ISIL by defeating it where it began, which is in Iraq and Syria. We described today that the implementation of the strategy in both of those places to degrade and defeat ISIL, so we're doing that. It is a complicated region. I called it kaleidoscopic in my statement, but American interests are not unclear. They're clear, and our strategy is intended to pursue those interests, and that is what we're doing in strengthening the pursuit of that strategy is why the chairman and I have been describing to you today the new steps we're taking in Iraq and Syria and with respect to unilateral actions.
Well, I know that's the position of the administration, but frankly, our Middle East allies that we talk to and come and visit us don't feel confident that they know what the long-term goals of the United States are. Were they to defend Iraq against ISIL, who we'd shared shoulder to shoulder General Dunford for a decade? We're going to pull out all troops, apparently not now in Afghanistan, regardless of the situation on the ground. What of our red lines in Syria? Are we going to honor those? Look, you can say that, but I think it's clear that confidence and understanding of where we stand and what we're going to do for the next 10, 20, 30 years, as any leader of a Middle Eastern nation has got to think, and as we should think, as a great nation, I don't think we're there. So I really believe more work needs to be done. I'm talking to my colleagues in the Senate. I believe we can reach a bipartisan policy. I really do. I don't think it's impossible, and I'm going to work toward that goal. One more thing, my time is over, but I believe the Defense Department may underestimate the critical nature of the refugee crisis. This is not like Iran-Iraq war that went on for many, many years. This is impacting Europe right now. It is a humanitarian crisis. It's being exploited by everyone else in the Middle East that would like to come to Europe. Europe is facing what one top diplomat told me was the greatest crisis since the World War II. And I think we've got to think about this safe haven, these safe zones, and get busy on it. And if we General Petraeus said it might have to have some of our people at risk defensively to try to protect those areas, but we wouldn't take a lot. You and I talked, Secretary Carter, about it. Can't we get moving on this? How many more millions are going to have to flee and being lined up in areas that we don't, before we act? Just morally, my judgment is that Europe needs to know there is a place for these refugees to go other than to flee the entire region. That will strengthen them. Can we not do that? Quickly.
Well, insofar as the refugees are coming from Syria, they're actually coming to Europe from several places.
All over.
But to the extent they're coming from Syria, this is why it is so important that the Syrian civil war be put to an end. And our approach to that is political. It's not military, and that's been a persistent subject of discussion here. We have not undertaken to achieve that goal militarily. Our approach to that is political. We hope that that transition occurs and that the civil war in Syria ends, and that is something that...
Or if it takes 3 years. Can't we provide some sort of area there for people who are in danger to have safety and not have to leave the entire region?
I'll just repeat what I've said. We have analyzed, and I'm prepared to have shared with you the analysis we've done of safe zones, buffer zones, and no-fly zones. We have looked at the advantages and costs of those, and the President has not taken them off the table, but we have not undertaken to create any of those zones at this time. I don't rule that out in the future, Senator, and we're happy to discuss it with you and discuss in a different setting the analysis that we have done.
On behalf of Chairman McCain, let me recognize Senator Ayotte.
I want to thank the chair. Also thank Senator Donnelly. Appreciate it. I wanted to
ask Secretary Carter. Recently, the Iranians have actually tested a long-range missile in violation of existing UN Security Council resolutions. This is something that Ambassador Power has confirmed, and in fact, if you look at what the Iranians have done post-agreement, not only have they tested this missile, but of course they've wrongfully convicted a Washington Post reporter in Iran. And they, of course, we've had a lot of discussion today about the cooperation between Russia and Iran undermining stability in Syria and our interests there. So I've also been brought to my attention recently that the Supreme Leader of Iran has actually said about the recent agreement that any imposition of sanctions at any level under any pretext, including repetitive and fabricated pretexts of terrorism and human rights on the part of any countries involved in the negotiations, will constitute a violation of the JCPOA. So here's my question to both of you, and primarily to you, Secretary Carter. What are we going to do about their violation of already existing UN resolutions when it comes to testing ballistic missiles and long-range missiles? And you know, you're the one that testified before this committee. The I in ICBM is intercontinental. And as I see it, already Iran is violating resolutions with no response from us. Already the Supreme Leader is basically saying you impose sanctions on any reason, even our support for terrorism or other human rights violation, we're going to walk away from the JCPOA. So do you not agree that their violation of the missile resolution warrants a response from the United States of America? And what is that response going to be? Because at this point, I haven't seen any response.
I think that it needs to be very clear, it's certainly clear to us in the Department of Defense, that the conclusion of the nuclear deal with Iran, assuming it gets implemented, which is part of what your question gets to, does not address all of our security concerns.
But let me ask you this, just
Iran.
Yes or no, should we respond to their testing of this missile that violates existing UN resolutions?
I'll describe one response that's in our area, and that is our continuing commitment to the development of missile defenses. That's one of the reasons why we are developing and fielding.
I understand that we're developing missile defenses, but what is our response when they behave badly already? Shouldn't there be a response from the United States of America? We had recently a panel of experts here, and I asked each of them, and they came from different perspectives, if we should respond, and they all agreed, yes.
Well, in our area of responsibility, I would say this, Senator, I'll let the Ambassador Power and Secretary Kerry address the diplomatic side of it, but in our area of responsibility, and I made this clear right from the beginning of the negotiations on the Iranian nuclear deal, that does not end all of our security concerns with respect to Iran.
I mean,
that is why,
Mr. Secretary, I'm sorry, I don't have a lot of time, but ending, it seems not ending. It seems like it's just beginning, really. As we think about this unholy alliance between Russia and Iran undermining our interests in Syria, as we think about them testing in our faces this long-range missile, as we think about what the Supreme Leader has basically said, any sanctions, we're going to walk away from the JCPOA, I would say that it's really just beginning. That said, before I leave, I don't have much time, but I need to ask a question of you, General Dunford. I had the privilege of recently on Friday going to the Guantanamo Bay detention facility and meeting with our men and women who serve there. And they're doing an excellent job under difficult circumstances, as you know. And one of the issues that was brought to my attention, and I know that you, as a leader in our military, one of your jobs, having been a commander and serving obviously in the highest position in our military, understand that taking care of our men and women in uniform is so critical. And yet we have a situation down there where we met with women guards who are being prevented from fully performing their mission because the 5 9/11 attackers who are charged with killing 3,000 Americans will not allow them to perform their duties because they're women. Can you tell me what you think about that and whether you think that is right and how we should be addressing that?
Senator, I can tell you how I feel about it. I feel the same way as the commander of U.S. Southern Command, General Kelly, who describes it as outrageous. And I read his weekly report and have read it for about probably the last 7 or 8 weeks, to include the 2 or 3 weeks before transition. So it's outrageous. He's identified it. And as you probably know, Senator, that's being worked by lawyers. It's an injunction. I'm not using that as an excuse. I'm just sharing with you that's actually where it's at right now. It's being worked by lawyers. The commander has identified it. I think it ought to be, it is outrageous. It ought to be fixed. It hasn't been to date.
I'd like to see the administration speak out against this. Here we talk about giving women more opportunity in combat, but this is a area where these women that we met with, by the way, that are serving there, they're the very best, and they are not being able to perform the full responsibilities of their positions simply because they are women, because 9/11 terrorists are manipulating the system to say that our women cannot guard them. Secretary Carter, I hope you would agree with me that this is outrageous, and I would hope that the administration would do everything in its power to stand up for our women in the military.
I do want to associate myself with what the chairman said. It is outrageous when General Kelly said this is the pursuant to an action of a federal judge, and I understand that. But if you're asked, I think it is counter to the way we treat service members, including women service members, and outrageous is a very good word for it.
I appreciate both of you being here. Thank you.
Mr. Secretary and General Dunford, I've known both of you for many years, and I have appreciated very much your outstanding work, and I am great admirers of both of you, and I appreciate your service. But could I again caution you, Mr. Secretary, it isn't helpful to our relations and members of this committee when there's a widely spread story stating the name of the ship, where it went, how it went, and then you come and tell us that you can't confirm or deny something that is out there in the media. So meaning that somebody has leaked all that information to the media and it's out there, but you can't tell members of this committee who have the responsibility. It isn't a privilege, it's a responsibility to exercise oversight. The second issue I want to mention to you is Guantanamo. I understand that the President has said on numerous occasions that one of his objections is Guantanamo. You and the President's top aide came to my office and said you were going to give me a plan. I've always favored closing Guantanamo for a whole variety of reasons, and yet we still haven't got a plan from you. In fact, not only not a plan, until I asked you about it specifically, there was no communication. After coming to my office and saying that you're going to give me that plan, and I said we needed it before we marked up the defense authorization bill. We got nothing, not an update, not a briefing on what was going on. So we put in the language in Guantanamo, and the President then voices his strong objection to Guantanamo. Finally, this issue of whether we are protecting those people who we are asking to fight against Bashar Assad and ISIS. Isn't it true that we've dropped munitions, General Dunford, to a group of people who we are supporting in Syria?
It is true, Senator.
It is true. And yet, are we going to protect them from Russian air attacks?
Senator, we have the authority, we have the capability, and we have options to defend the forces that we've.
But is it true that the Russians are already attacking them?
The ones we have trained, they have
I'm not asking the ones we trained, the ones we dropped munitions to.
No, the Russians have not attacked the ones we've dropped munitions to, Senator.
They have not.
No, Chairman.
And they have not.
To make sure that you and I are speaking of the same group, the group I'm referring to is what's known as the Syrian Arab Coalition. They're operating in the northeast part of the country, north of Raqqa, and we recently provided resupply to those individuals, ammunition.
And if they're attacked by the Russians, we'll defend them.
Senator, we have the capability to do that, and we'd provide options. I can't answer that question.
They'd be interested. They'd be interested in knowing. I think if we're going to give them equipment and ask them to fight, and then they're going to be, we can't answer to them whether we're going to protect them or not. I don't think, I think it's a degree of immorality. So anyway.
Chairman, may I, on the 2 points you raised, just take a moment. First of all, again, I don't mean to be coy about the ship sailing, and I know things are in the newspaper. I'm just going to tell you where I'm coming from on that. It has nothing to do with this particular operation. There are all kinds of things in the newspaper that that should not be in the newspaper. I don't like to talk about military operations publicly. You are, of course, entitled to know everything and be briefed on everything. But talking about things in a public setting, I'm in general not in favor of. So I don't want you to think I'm being coy or evasive.
But what is classified about it? What is it that you wouldn't want? I mean, it's, in fact, I think literally every member of this committee applauds it. So I'm not sure that what the reason is why you wouldn't want to just state what has already been from somebody that works for you, okay, the name of the ship, where it went, when it went, how it went, but yet you won't tell us. That causes frustration, Mr. Secretary.
All right. Well, I don't mean to cause you frustration. I just wanted you to know where I'm coming from.
Well, I hope you understand our frustration.
I do, but it may be my hesitation is excessive, but I don't like to talk about military operations in public, and perhaps this one should be an exception. But let me go on to the other thing you said about Gitmo. I, too, favor, like you, closing Gitmo if that is at all possible. That because some of the detainees in Gitmo cannot be safely transferred to another location. In order to close Gitmo, as you know, we would need to find a location in the United States or locations in which they could continue to be detained. What has taken the time, Chairman, is that we had to survey a number of sites. We've done that at a number of sites around the country. We've completed that, and we had, some of those are Department of Defense sites, some of those are Bureau of Prison sites, and we needed to have them nominated by the Justice Department and then to do the site surveys there. All of that took some time. That process is now complete, and I expect you'll get your proposal shortly.
All right, I understand, but I would have appreciated an update. And the cynicism over on this side at the Capitol is, to my view, somewhat justified because the law was broken when Mr. Bergdahl was swapped for 5 people. The law required that the President of the United States notify the Congress of the United States, and he didn't do it. So, frankly, there's a credibility gap that is huge when the President acts in direct violation of the law and using the excuse, well, he was afraid there was going to be a leak. Well, to me, that's not sufficient reason to violate the law, and so therefore, the cynicism here is immense. And to expect, the President complains about the NDAA, to expect that this committee would act after the President has violated the law, and there is no plan, is, of course, something that is not neither reasonable nor in keeping with our responsibilities. And so, could I say again, of my respect, I appreciate the great work that both of you do. As I said, we've known each other a long time. But I also have to tell you, there's a certain amount of frustration here because of the lack of communication. What we just talked about, Guantanamo was one. Another one is this policy or lack of policy about what people we train and equip and whether we're going to defend them or not. The lack of a strategy to say that we can have to take out Syrian air defenses in order to establish a no-fly zone is simply not true. You can ask, I'll ask any military expert, that's not true. You don't have to take out Syrian air defenses. It's Syrians that can't fly into our places. And we've had military members like General Petraeus and General Keane and many others who obviously have a very different view of the whole issue of what we're going to do, which by doing nothing has triggered a flood of millions of refugees, which is a problem we're going to be grappling with for many years to come. It didn't have to happen. Well, I look forward to more conversations with you. I appreciate you coming to the committee. I appreciate your service, and this hearing, I'm sure you'll be glad to know, is adjourned.
Thank you, Chairman.